Okay, in this video we're going to talk about event listeners. JavaScript has three ways to do event listeners. You can use an attribute right in your HTML, you can use a property, or you can use the addEventListener method. I'll show you all three ways. Only the last way is kind of the proper way, but you'll see all three, so I'll just show you them. I have the fan and the AC running. I don't know if it's going to affect the audio in this video. If it does, sorry. Okay, so event listeners as attributes in your HTML tags. So here we have our HTML, we have a button tag. I'm going to refresh this. So here's our little button, and here we have an on-click attribute of our button. On-click equals quote. Inside the quote is our script. So when we click on the button, the script is going to run. So actually the event is only called click, but because we're using the attribute method of events, you have to add the word on to it, so it's on click. So when I click this button, our console log smiley face gets fired. Okay, here is the second way to do events, event listeners as properties. So we're going to run a property on an element. In this case, we're using the window element. So this is the window.onLoad property. So this is the load event we're looking for. When the load event gets fired, our function here is going to get fired. So window onLoad equals function. Load is kind of weird. There's some subtleties to it that I'm not going to get into right now. JavaScript kind of handles window onLoad stuff the best, or document ready stuff. Really, document ready is better than window onLoad, like JavaScript document ready. But since we're doing native JavaScript, I'm just going to show you real quick window onLoad. So as soon as the page got loaded, which was pretty fast, there's nothing in there, our console log gets fired. Okay, so we're just going to run down a bunch of JavaScript events here, and really there are tons of JavaScript events. I don't know if there are 50 or 100 or something like that. And some of them are legacy, and some haven't been implemented by the browser, some are only in the spec, etc., etc. I'll show you about 10 or 15 right now. So here is the submit, the submit event. So when this submit button gets hit, the submit button gets fired. Submit is a form event, and then our console log will run. Now notice when I hit submit, the smiley face flashed real quick, and then the page reloaded. That was a form with no action, so it just reloaded the page. It didn't go anywhere, and you could see it added a little query string, a little question mark with nothing after it. So I'll show you the proper way to kind of cancel that form submit, so the default event doesn't actually fire. I'll show you that in a little bit, not right now. Okay, here we are looking at on form reset. So reset is a weird type of button you don't see too much. This is input type reset, and that'll just clear all your form input if you had any. So I click my reset button, and the JavaScript reset event gets fired. Okay, here is the click event. So I'm going to grab my element, my button, using document get element by ID, and then I'm going to do my button dot on click, and then my code's going to fire. So here is JavaScript on error. This is a different one a little bit. So whenever JavaScript throws an error, it's going to throw, well, not in all cases, but in some cases it will throw the error, it'll trigger the error event. And the error event has a couple of nice little things that we can use. Instead of just doing sort of a random console, we could actually console log out the specific error, the URL it came from, the page URL, and the line number. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bigger here. So what we're looking at here in red is actually just the default Chrome JavaScript error, and then in the black is what we actually are throwing ourselves. So here is the error message, the URL, and the line number. So those are just things that come with the error event that you can handle in any way you want. Okay, so here is on resize. So when we resize the window, the resize event gets fired, and we console log our stuff out. Notice it got fired 13 times because I kept dragging it. Here's a similar one on scroll. So when I use the Windows scroll bar, the JavaScript scroll event gets fired, and our code runs. Here's the select event. So this is when you select text, the select event gets fired. Unfortunately, it's not any text. It's not like in a P or an H1 text. It has to be in an input or text area, which is kind of stupid, but that's how it is. And this is our first example using addEventListener method. So here before, we were doing like a property of an element, and sometimes we were grabbing that, you could use the window element, or you could do it like a get element by ID element. In this case, and by the way, this is the proper way to do it, not the previous two ways. We're going to still grab our element by ID, or we can use the window in some cases, and then you use an addEventListener. addEventListener method takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the event you're listening for. Notice we're not using on. It's not on select anymore. That was just when we were using attributes and properties. Now that we're using the addEventListener, we could just use the event name itself, and it's in quotes. The second attribute is the function, whatever code we want to run, and you can make it a separate modular function. In this case, we're just using an anonymous function that we're going to use right here. And then the third parameter is whether you're capturing and all this. So we're just going to use false. In modern browsers, I believe you can omit that and it'll be false by default, but for proper compatibility, you're supposed to put it in. So we're not going to get on to capturing. We're just keeping it simple here. So anyway, so this is the same example as before, the select event. When we select this text, our event gets fired. Continuing on using the addEventListener method, we're going to run down a bunch of other stuff. Here is focus. So focus in JavaScript means when you click into something. No, never mind. I'll show you that in a second. Here we are going to go back to our form example on submit. So this is I have my little HTML form here. I'm going to click submit and the form will submit. Now remember before when we clicked the submit and the form submitted, the page refreshed because it was like it's going to try to do whatever your action is, or if you don't have any action, it'll just refresh the page. And that was kind of annoying. Actually, I'm going to get rid of this and just refresh the page properly. Okay, so here's our page before we submit the form. Now when I click submit, our console log got fired. Here's a smiley face, but there's no question mark, there's no query string at the end of the URL, and there was no page refresh. The smiley face is still there. So we did that by passing in a parameter to the event handler, that second argument. Our parameter, our argument is E. I believe it can be anything, but E is just short for event in this case. So whatever you pass in here is a variable that's going to be the event itself. So the event itself here is the submission, the form submission. So we could do e.preventDefault and open parentheses, close parentheses. So that all this is doing is saying whatever the event is, prevent the default action from actually occurring. So here we're logging out our smiley face, and then we're actually killing the form submit before it happens. So that's why the page didn't refresh. This form never actually got submitted. Okay, here we're going to do focus. Focus in JavaScript means when you click into something, like an input. The opposite of focus is blur. That happens when you click out of something. So I'm going to click into this, nothing happens, and I click out of it, and the blur event gets fired. Next is the change event. Change event is when something changes. So what can use this on? Well, one thing is on a select. When you select different options on a select dropdown, the change event gets fired. Yeah, here's mouseover. We already did click. I don't know why that was there. So here's a little div we set up in our HTML. It has 100 height, 100 width, and then a little border on it. We're grabbing it using getElement by ID, same as always, and then on our element we're doing addEventListener mouseover. Mouseover just means hover. So whenever I hover over this thing, boom, our event fires. Now notice if I hover off of it, it doesn't do anything, but every time I hover over it, it fires again. So kind of the usual way you would see this is you might see two different things. And so this is kind of the long way of doing something like jQuery.hover or something like that. So we have mouse over and mouse out. That means when you hover over something and then when you hover off of something. So I have a smiley face going when we hover over it, and then I have a frowny face going when we hover off of it. Smiley, frowny, smiley, frowny. And that'll do for this video. I'll see you in the next one.